Efforts to disrupt the production of drugs in Afghanistan have already cost the U.S. billions of dollars, and yet it's not helped to solve the problem in the slightest. Even when cooperation between Moscow and Washington on the drug trafficking was at its highest, this only helped to put pressure on the illegal trade worldwide. It now seems the more money that flows into the country, the more drugs flow out. So Europe, Russia and America, they're all on the receiving end of the narcotics. Let's have a look at the figures for you here on RT International. Reports say Afghanistan is responsible for about 80% of the world's opium. Heroin production has also surged. It's now 40 times higher than it was in 2001, and more than 1 million users died over the course of the past decade. But the earnings from the trade are clearly considered worth the risk of production, and the lack of international dialogue could let this business grow even further. Well, that's what at least one expert on the region told us here at RT International.
By far, the main source for drugs or for narcotic products that's smuggled to Europe and Russia is actually Afghanistan. The West, and of course the US in particular, have to set aside all their geopolitical interests when it comes to the global security. Russia in particular has got a huge interest and stake in this process, and definitely they have to be taken into confidence, and they have to be incorporated in the process. If there is a lack of cooperation between Russia and the West, that will be a huge threat to Europe's security and also to the overall social stability.
Now, more than half of all provinces in Afghanistan are growing poppy crops. And as RT's Lucy Kafanov reports, it's taken its toll on Afghan society.
Last year, Afghanistan recorded its largest opium harvest ever. And the scene behind me tells a story of just how devastating that's been for the people here. The men are part of a growing addiction epidemic. According to the United Nations, more than 1 million Afghans are addicted to opium and heroin out of a population of some 30 million people, which makes Afghanistan not just the world's top exporter of the drug, but one of its top consumers, too. Despite more than a decade of Western efforts to curb production, a combination of economics and political instability has meant that farmers are planting more poppy than ever before. More than 500,000 acres in 2013, which according to the UN is a 36% increase from the previous year. And that's translated to big bucks. Afghanistan is believed to have harvested nearly $1 billion worth of the crop last year alone. Now, this illegal opium economy is a lifeline for thousands of Afghan farmers, but it also funded drug traffickers and the Taliban, a problem that extends far beyond this country's borders. More than 3 decades of war and instability in Afghanistan has fueled drug production, and efforts to stop it simply haven't worked. The U.S. has spent $7 billion to counter narcotics since 2002, another $3 billion on agricultural programs that were supposed to help growers switch to other crops. But despite that, the United Nations says 19 of the country's 34 provinces are now growing opium, which also reflects an increase in recent years. With the presidential elections around the corner, along with a looming withdrawal of most foreign troops, Afghanistan's booming drug trade is a major concern with global implications. And if Western allies and the Afghan government don't do more to tackle production, the fears here are that the drug trade could splinter the country into a fragmented criminal narco state. Reporting in Kabul for RT, I'm Lucy Kafanov.
And the Afghanistan election is set for the 5th of April, and we will be covering the vote extensively. Meanwhile, we will continue our series of reports on the future of Afghanistan.
The people of Afghanistan head to the polls for the 3rd time since the fall of the Taliban. But will this vote pave the way for the country's first ever democratic transfer of power? Afghanistan votes, an RT News special with me, Lucy Kafanov.